Kia ora and welcome to another Aotearoa Rugby Pod. No mai, haere mai, and there's a lot to talk about this weekend. The All Blacks post a big score, but probably didn't play as well as they should. The Black Ferns in all sorts of trouble after 2 weeks against England, and a number of games. The Springboks right to the wire against Wales. The Wallabies upset against Scotland. 3 in a row for Scotland now. So much going on and more games to look at for next week. I'm joined by Bryn down in Christchurch and James Parsons in Auckland. Lads, let's start with the All Blacks. And Jipper, first up, a frustrating watch, a difficult watch, that win over Italy, considering the score was, 47-9, but that really doesn't indicate the way that they played.
No, and probably not a fair reflection on the Italian performance. But I kind of like it going into Ireland. Like, there'll be a real hard edge in the All Blacks environment this week, and after the Irish display, it sets it up for an awesome game. There were a lot of positives to come out of the weekend, the way that they had to sort of grind their way through, find different ways to win games. And I suppose the biggest thing I took out of it is the old cliche still runs true. You've got to give it to the big boys up front to settle things down. 4 maul tries, a new variation 5+1 switch move, which involved a little bit of the backs, but there were 3 rucks in the lead up to that. So the men up front really had to do a lot of the grunt work. And, like Bryn will agree with this, whenever things sort of get out of control, you just go back to your basics, you get the ball in the corner, tuck it under the big fella's chest, and they go to work. And I think Dane Coles and Asafa Moore are 2 of the best exponents off the back of them all.
But Bryn, should they have done more of that? I mean, there was a lot of side-to-side play. It seemed like they just walked into the Italian rush defence and let the Italians frustrate them when they could have maybe kept it closer a little bit more, used those strengths and then open up.
Yeah, I think so. But then you've also got to credit Italy on their defence. And, if you look at the percentage that they were tackling, they made a lot of tackles in that game. 172 tackles and at 88%, which is a pretty high success rate considering how much ball the New Zealanders had. So, they had 235 passes, and even when Finlay Christie was on predominantly at that time, the ball was playing at a quick pace. But, the fact that the Italians defended really, really well, and some pretty uncharacteristic errors, I probably think. You look in that kind of first 10 minutes, there were so many mistakes with ball handling skills and dropping the ball. And then on top of that as well, penalties, in the first 10, 15 minutes, there were 7, 8 penalties. And so when you've got that kind of combination of dropping the ball, not being able to build pressure, and then giving penalties as well, it's so hard to be able to get back into the game. But like Jip said, when things weren't going so well, their set piece really dominated. I thought our scrum was fantastic, and especially early on. And then especially with the line-out mauls, whenever you can get 4 line-out drives, and with the Safa and Dane Cole's been able to be beneficiaries of that, it just comes back to the hard grunt work and the All Blacks wanted to do. But I think, moving forward, they might not be able to get that dominance against Ireland, who were fantastic against the Japanese, which no doubt we'll talk about. But I guess probably the inaccuracies and the amount of errors and handling errors that the All Blacks had, due to the effect of the line speed pressure that the Italians put on them, no doubt that'll be trying to get solutions around what that's going to look like, holding your depth a little bit, being able to go into contact, and probably I thought our breakdown as well, just being able to continue to keep moving bodies, which is probably going to be really needed coming against a very strong Ireland team who had a great performance against Japan on the weekend.
I think Bryn brings up a key point there around the breakdown. Like, if you look at the rush D against the Springboks, we spoke about Malcolm Marx and Kitsoff, believe it or not, and they did it again on the weekend. But when we cut back in due to that outside line pressure, we were getting turnovers, like penalties via Marx a couple of times. This occasion, we cut back in with that defence, and I think we were so eager to get in there so there wasn't a turnover, we got penalised a lot from entering the ruck from the side. So I think that needs to probably be the work on. Look, if we do make a bad decision and we don't do a kick pass, or we can't get to the edge, what are we going to do to sort these breakdowns out so that we can restart? Because even if it's in the middle of the field, they can get to an edge and then they'll be able to find their way again. And I just felt that both times that we've faced this real rush D, as Bryn said, our breakdown just wasn't as clinical as what we saw when they're running hot. Like when our forwards are cleaning breakdowns, moving bodies, sometimes only one cleaner and that ball's up for 9s. They love it. First 5s love running that flat. I think that will be a focus for them this week, because it won't change. The Irish defence is well organised.
I think also as well on that Jip, I saw a good solution that they All Blacks did, which they did previous in the previous test, doing pick and goes and going through the middle of the field. And I think anytime you've got that kind of line speed and there's that pressure where you're coming back in because of the defensive pressure, those pick and goes to be able to then go on top of teams, it sucks the team. There's a couple of defenders a little bit tighter, and then you've got the ability to be able to get on the edge and maybe try and go through that way, which we saw early in that second half. So that can be a continuation of hopefully going forward, because I know Ireland, especially with Farrell and his defensive success he's had in the Lions and when he was with England as well, no doubt they're going to be wanting to put a lot of pressure on the All Blacks, and so that's a good solution going forward. And then I also liked the fact that they did kick down the middle of the field a lot more with Geordie Barrett and David Havili when they did come on in that second half. And even though it was in the middle of the field, the fact that it rolled and bounced and was able to get into that kind of territory of the 22 of the Italians for them to be able to then kick it and then be able to go to our line out more and our set piece dominance, which we had on the weekend.
Is that a big indicator maybe towards this next test against Ireland, how important Geordie Barrett and David Havili are to the overall scheme things here, Jipper? Having those extra skill sets, the ability to find territory when you're in trouble, is slightly better than the other players in their positions.
I think even for that skill set, but more importantly for the contestable balls, we're put under pressure again with contestables. We'll see that again. Like Ireland have got the ability to play contestables, but they've also got the ability to run. So you'll be really switched on. The French are the same. So I think if you're a great exponent in the air in that back three, and you've got the ability to sort of kick long like Geordie does, I think it sort of signs them in for that job, because we know what's coming. People have clearly seen that as a way to get points. And Monty Ioane was really disruptive in his chase. Like their kick chase was really good. So I think that'll be an area of work on for them this week. I think it's a continuation. Like when I was playing, like that turtle thing that they chuck on the back to practice is out every training, because it's not an easy job. I understand it. It's like throwing in the wind. It's a thankless task. But someone's got to do it. And if you're the best at that, I think you're putting yourself in line for that selection.
Have there been many players in this test match that stand out? I think Ian Foster said that, a lot of the players who played against Italy could feature against either Ireland or France, littered through those teams somehow. Bryn, do you think that anyone put their hand up to the point where they've demanded a spot this weekend out of that Italy test?
Oh, look, I definitely thought Finlay Christie was outstanding on the weekend, and he came on early and not going to be too sure with what Brad's injury is going to be and how long he might be out for. But look, he was outstanding, not only just with his clearance to be able to get the ball out, but that support line to be able to get that try. He was right there in a kind of big moment in the game where we didn't have a lot of momentum, and that was kind of open the shackles when Uffa went through and being able to give it to Finlay. But then you talk around the escort game, Jip. There were a couple of times in that game that Finn actually ended up going to get up for the ball because our defenders, the guys coming forward to come get the ball, couldn't actually get there. And then defensively as well, he's just a little pocket rocket, Jip. You've obviously been in and around him quite a lot, but defensively, I thought he made some really good decisions, been able to make some really good tackles as well. So I think with the fact that, don't know what the injury with Brad's going to be, and obviously TJ was rested, I think Finlay, due to his performance on the weekend, was probably one guy that I thought really put up his hand for a game against Ireland, whether it be coming off the bench or he gets to be in that 23.
Yeah, look, I agree. Finn was my player of the day. And it just purely for how much gas he had in the tank. He's that explosive 9 off the back of a line-out, putting pressure on that first receiver's skill set. His link game with Offa and setting up that try for Sevu Reece. And when there wasn't a cleaner there, this is what I love about Finn, is he just goes and hoovers rucks, and he does a good job about it. He's not a big man, but he just rips in and moves bodies and just said, well, if I'll do your job, you do mine. And he has a real presence of mind that the ball is gold, and he'll get in there and look after it. I just thought he had a fantastic test under trying circumstances. He didn't have front foot ball all the time, didn't have clean rucks, but he certainly made every post a winner. And the other guy for me is Sam Kane. I thought he was massive. 80 minutes with not a hell of a lot of games under his belt. Top tackler, 9 out of 9 carries. And he got a couple of turnovers as well. I thought the skip had a big day out.
Tough night for Richie Mo'unga. The opposition in his face a lot. Against line speed and with a forward pack that's not necessarily cleaning out, Bryn, was he at a hiding to nothing in that game?
Oh, not at all. I think there were some great things that he did do. You look at the kind of the 70th minute mark when he puts that great ball away, holds that ball up and being able to get through and be able to score that try for Bridgie. But, so I think there were some good touches that he did have, but I think it just comes back again. You've got to be able to credit the Italian defense and what the kind of pressure that not only put on Richie, but the guys on the outside. So as an inside back pairing, it's really important that you've got the communication from the outside, whether that be from your midfielder, the loose forward, or the pivots in behind the second pod, and giving that clear information to him. So look, I think it's a good learning, for not only Richie but a lot of those other players as well, to be able to how do you deal with line speed, because look, when there has been put pressure on the All Blacks due to that line speed pressure, and we're not getting that quick breakdown ball, or we're not being able to be as ruthless around our clean outs to be able to get that ball and suck guys in. It's really hard for the insides backs. But I think, his goal kicking was great on the weekend as well, being able to get there, which I think is going to be a crucial part, especially with Bodie and Richie being able to, if they do goal kick, it's one thing that Richie's done really well in that test match. And he had a few good touches as well. So I don't think it was a bad test match for Richie. I just think, considering the conditions and also the kind of defensive pressure the Italians put on him, it made him be able to go to other parts of his game that he had to try and go do really, really well.
I have to agree with you, Bryn. I think the pressure that he was under through that D and the decisions he made was fantastic, because a lot of the time, when they had made a few errors and they probably overran at the start in that exit zone, their kick to run ratio wasn't quite right and putting themselves under pressure. He actually put the ball down the middle a couple of times and said, let's just get out of our territory, and made some good decisions, tactical decisions. And I think Bryn's point is key on that. It's just like they get held up and cheered on. It's a brutal position. It's like a quarterback in the NFL. When it's going well, they'll get all the plaudits, but when it's going not so well, the heat comes on. But it's, as we always say here every week, it's an all of 15. Everyone's got a role. Those guys out wide have got to identify his space so that he can just pull trigger. He doesn't have to be thinking about everything. So I think it was a combination of things, certainly not individual on Richie.
There was some chat after the game. I think Sam Kane talked about the inexperience in the side, but most players now are quite experienced against that kind of line speed. They see it week in, week out, don't they? So how much of an excuse is it to have not played a lot of test football when you're coming up against an Italian side who, in the most part, you would expect to be more Super Rugby level players necessarily than test level players if you look at the scores that they've copped over the years? Is it really a decent excuse, Bryn, an inexperience against an approach like that?
Oh, look, I don't think so, and that's the reason why it's a test match. We obviously said we were thinking the All Blacks were going to be very convincing, but these are the best players in Italy that are putting on that jersey, and every time they play a New Zealand team, or most of the countries in the world play New Zealand, they take it to another level. And we talked around how good their defense was and being able to put pressure on, but I think probably the most disappointing things for the All Blacks, some mistakes were just not due to the line speed pressure or pressure at all from the Italians. It was just more so inflicted from themselves, and so those are the ones that you would be frustrated with. Yes, don't get me wrong, there's going to be times that you're going to be put under pressure, and through that kind of defensive pressure or pressure in general, that's when you're going to make the mistakes. But it's the ones early on, you're talking around, just drops balls right in front of you, or an incorrect clean out, which you're probably you're doing time and time again in training, being able to get that to where you want it to be. So I think it's the things that you can control that weren't put under pressure. Those are the ones that you can control, and so those are the things that they'll look back and thinking, yes, the defensive pressure was good, but at the same time, when there wasn't any pressure on them at all, those uncharacteristic mistakes that we don't see from the All Blacks a lot, especially early on in the game, those will be things that they'll be more so disappointed on, I think.
I think it's inexperience in combinations is probably what they mean. Ben Darwin, I always go back to him because I love his work, but he says there's such a big difference in players the longer they play together, because they almost know what their inside player's going to do before they know they're going to do it. They're in sync, and I think that's probably what it means by inexperience and combinations. If you look at the midfield, you look at the locking period, the loose forwards, a couple of times, we kicked to the corner and there was an overthrow. That wasn't a skill set area, that was just timing, and a lot of that is combination. Same with Quinn Tapia and Braden Ennor, like a couple of hard passes, bounces off a chest. Those sorts of things, it's not an experience of line speed pressure, it's just the combinations and knowing each other really well, which I think is what they were alluding to.
On the more experienced side of things, you mentioned Sam Kane before, and you did refer to Dane Coles earlier. Those guys now, Bryn, do you feel like they're in a position where they're up to starting against Ireland this weekend?
Yeah, look, I think so. I think the fact that they are so experienced and they have had that test match against the Americans and then been able to get some valuable minutes against the Italians in a bruising encounter. So look, I think I agree with Jip. You know, the kind of 80 minutes that Sam put in and being able to get what he needed out of that test match to almost put himself in the best position to play in that Ireland and French test. But you know, you talk around Dalton Papali'i before. Previously, you know, he's had a great campaign in the Rugby Championship and even against earlier in the year as well. So I think, you know, we're going to have this conversation around who's really going to miss out because we've got so many guys that are playing well, that have been given opportunities earlier in the competition, and then now the likes of Sam Kane, Dane Coles, who scores 2 tries and was really good at set piece time. It gets them in a position where they could be able to be put in that position to play. But again, there's so much competition in this team, and so I'm really looking forward to see who is going to be put in those positions for that starting 15 and even the 23 as well with those bench roles, and who's going to be able to, you know, put on that jersey.
Mm. And there's plenty on this game as well, considering what happened the last time they went to Dublin. I was there. It was a difficult night afterwards, interviewing Irish people in their celebrations that night. The Irish themselves are coming off a revenge win of their own against Japan. I'm not sure any of us saw the 60-5 scoreline coming, Jipper. That looked good for Ireland.
Mate, I was watching that game and I just said, this is some of the best footy I've seen played. Like that first 40, some of the skill set showing, like the commitment to their system to manipulate the French defence, and then their decision making was outstanding. If you look at their forwards and their ability to give balls out the back, balls to give tips to their mates, and then the active, I suppose, first receiver out the back, and then the guys outside of that are running committed lines which commit Japanese defenders. They go out the back and break them on the edge. If it doesn't commit the defenders, they're making good decisions and putting, you know, Tag Furlong went through a hole at one stage, then he gave it back to his mate Porter, the loose head prop, and they scored from that. Jamison Gibson Park picks it up, grubbers it for an outstanding try because he sees that space in the backfield, probably called from the winger, but to execute it. Like their skill set, their collision, and then off set piece, like it's hard to score tries off mauls because if it is stagnated, it's sort of, you know, I suppose slow ball. But they scored a beauty going wide because they saw when the defence had tightened, they could go to that width, and then they went down the blind with Johnny Sexton. So I just think their option taking, their clinical nature in their running lines, and the physical nature of their ball carriers, not one-dimensional. They had the contestable game, but they also ran it from deep. It was one of the most complete performances, and that Japanese side isn't, you know, that bad, you know, like they were world class against the Wallabies, and we were talking about up this one being close. So we all got that horribly wrong, and I have to commend the Irish. Like that was just great watching. Great to see Next Bluesman doing so well, and Jamison Gibson Park too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things about the Irish performance was the number of offloads they threw. You know, I think they kicked 7 box kicks and had 18 offloads, where we might normally see almost the opposite from Ireland, Bryn.
Oh, look, to be honest, it's more so their attacking shape and how they manipulated the Japanese, and more so the variety in their attack shape that they had, whether it be off their face play shape. Jip, you talked around it, very similar shape to the All Blacks with the 3 forwards off 9 going out the back to 6, and you've got the 2 lines that are going running outside that kind of hard defense, which we talked around with Richie Mo'unga when he gets it right in that kind of play. They did that so many times on the weekend, and so but what there was on the top of was such quick ball. You know, the ruthlessness around their cleanouts and being able to. I'd like to see what the Lightning quick ball stats were in that first half, because it just seemed that every time they were going through contact, Jarvo was there, go, 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 go. But then from that, to be set from that lightning quick ball and their phase play shape that they had, you're talking around the example that I've just used, but then in the phase play shape as well with Sexton, Archie, and then even Conway as well, be able to see with that kick like you said, but they just had so many variations, so many options, and they looked clear in their decision making around it. You know, so there's a lot of stuff that was going on, but they made the right decisions. So whether that was just through setting really early, setting where your space is and see what's in front of you, and then the communication skills from that to be able to give those kicks, be able to give those passes under pressure. It was really, really exciting to see that. And I think probably the 2 things that I think for them moving forward against the All Blacks, which they can do well, is around their phase play attack that we've just alluded to, and how if they can be real brutal around that breakdown and give really quick ball moving forward. But then, you know, Conway and his kick chase off Jamison Gibson Park, you know, we know traditionally with Conor Murray and how many times he's been able to put the All Blacks and teams under pressure with their box kicks. But look, Conway's running through and being able to beat past the escort, which, the Italians did a little bit on the weekend, so it'll be a ploy that hopefully, you'd think Ireland would be able to go through that, but they're not one-dimensional. They'll get that kick game, but then they've got the ability to be able to play with the ball in front. So, now, I was really, really impressed. I thought it was going to be really a closer test match, to be honest, but for the amount of points that they put on and the variety that they showed and how clinical and ruthless they were, they'll be sitting pretty happy going into an All Blacks test week, knowing that they've put in that kind of performance and got through different variations of their game against the Japanese on the weekend.
And to harp back, Jipper, about our mate Ben Darwin and the talk of consistency of selection, when you look at Ireland over the last 5 or so years, despite the fact that things, sometimes hiccup at big tournaments, the team is pretty much always the same. You see the same base there, minor changes, but the same base. And they know how to beat this All Black side. And the last 3 times the All Blacks have been there in Dublin, it has not been easy.
The mental side of the game is huge, isn't it? There's 10% of it's probably physical and what gifts you've got there. But mentally, if you're got that belief in yourself and your squad, you can lift another level and really bring yourself into these fixtures. And that's what this Irish team's got against the All Blacks now. So it certainly poses a big threat, but an exciting threat. And I don't think one that the All Blacks will be too afraid of either, because they'll be probably really honed in on themselves this week and making sure that they're the complete package. And I think sometimes that's the best way to be when you're coming up to big test matches, is if you look after your own game, look after your mates either side of you, you'll put in a good shift. But you're right, and the Irish team will be buoyed by that. Hopefully not too buoyed, and that's no disrespect to Japan, because that wasn't a usual performance from Japan either. They had a high error rate, and they had a number of penalties. They struggled at line-out time. I don't think they're going to see that this weekend. And when the Japanese got it right, they actually scored a good try. And that was the Japanese side that we've grown to know and love over the last few years. So it was an off night for Japan, a seriously on night for Ireland, but they'll want to make sure that they dot their I's and cross their T's just as much as they did for this Japanese performance, because it'll make them, I'm just so excited for this test match. I'll be honest, I was looking forward to that All Black France one, but this one's right in my radar now. This is seriously exciting footy to be waking up to.
It is an interesting comparison like that, because I don't think the All Blacks have lost in Paris since 1973. So they've got a better record in Paris than they do at Eden Park. So, in a way, the consistency there for the All Blacks is not as big of an issue as it has been when you get to Ireland and you face what happens at Aviva Stadium. And it is quite an intimidating atmosphere to go in. Are you thinking the same way, Bryn, that this Ireland test is almost the make or break of this tour?
Oh, I think, yeah, absolutely. Just with the performances they had on the weekend and the fact of, the last couple of test matches that Ireland and the All Blacks have been, it's been a ding-dong battle, and, Ireland have, got that result as well. So I think just for the fact, for me personally, before this test match, I was very similar to Jip and around looking forward to that French game. But look, with the way that Ireland played, and look, if they can do a lot of those things really, really well on the weekend against the All Blacks, then they're going to be able to put them under a lot of pressure and being able to put points on the board. But I think, at the same time, Ireland will be pretty understanding around, it's going to go up another step. Yes, they did some great things on the weekend, and they'll be buoyed by that with what Jip said, and I reckon they will. But at the same time, they know that they're going to be a different stand against the All Blacks. And I definitely think it's going to be around that physicality and breakdown battle. I think anytime we've had Ireland have had success against the All Blacks, been able to slow down that ball and been able to bring that line speed that Farrell's really, really been accustomed to, being with the British and Irish Lions and previously with England as well, been able to put that pressure under the All Blacks. And so they'll see the Italy pitches, and they'll probably see a stronger team that's going to be up against them, but they'll be taking some learnings and probably some thoughts around how they can try and rectify and being able to slow down their All Black ball, and then being able to put them under pressure through their face post shape and being able to shut down like the Italians did on the weekend.
You bring up an interesting point. You've got to give it to Andy Farrell. He is the low-key master of defence against the All Blacks. No one really talks about him. They always talk about the head coach, but when you think about Chicago, you think about 2017 Lions, you think about Dublin, the one guy who's always there has been Farrell. And he's a guy who's up there now in the coaching ranks, Jibber.
Oh, absolutely. And he brings a hard edge because he's done it himself. So I think that brings another element to it when you're in there coaching and you're wanting to bring, the physicality, but, I suppose controlled physicality. He has a presence about him at training, and the players will know that, and they'll want to live up to that. So I just think this will be a great stepping stone for him to get out of probably Joe Schmidt's shadow, if you know what I mean. Like it's his opportunity to knock the All Blacks over, but also make a statement that he's been under a bit of pressure previously, so this is a great chance for him.
And similar to McBurn, he's a guy who came from a rugby league background, or like McBurn with the AFL. Not an out-and-out rugby guy, but obviously a brilliant tactical brain that's just jumped on top of this, Bryn.
Well, to be honest, I think he's probably just got the best of both worlds. Being able to be, when he was an international playing rugby league, he was, classed as one of the best second rows in the world, and at that time, and made that decision to then go into rugby. So, I think for the fact that he's had two different environments and two different games, you can take the positives of what and some strengths of the rugby league system and style, then being able to come into rugby and understand, what it is to be a rugby player. So, I think he's got the balance really well around. He's probably the first guy that really implemented that line speed pressure. Back in the Lions day and even before that. So I think, he's got a great understanding defensively, and it's been his role predominantly when in coaching. So, like we've said, like we just talked about, he's had some success in that British and Irish Lions series and even with Ireland and England as well. So I think he'll feel confident knowing that, the structures that he does put in place in the past has put the All Blacks under pressure. But at the same time, the All Blacks have had a pretty good understanding. This isn't just the first time that line speed pressure has been put on them. It's been for, a couple of years now that line speed pressure is going to be coming. So no doubt they'll be having solutions around what they did on the weekend, whether that's holding your feet a little bit more, having that animation of having a down line to get that defensive pressure, to get them thinking at least, or kick space, which they did in that second half with going into the middle of the field. So there are solutions that they will be looking for, but at the same time, it's just like we said, every time a good line speed defensive pressure team puts you under a lot of pressure, and it takes just a small margin of getting it right. That you have to get it right, or else you're going to be getting penalties against you, or not getting it right and getting that kind of defensive pressure of being behind your sticks and behind the advantage line.
In saying that, I think last time the All Blacks were in Dublin, they threw away 3 or 4 tries. They were able to handle that pressure. They made some line breaks, but they couldn't deliver that last little element. So, they probably feel like they've got a system that can get through there. How about we shift over towards France versus Argentina, a couple of weeks away from the All Blacks French test? What did we see from France, Jipper, in that match, 29-20 in the end, that makes you think that France are on track?
Well, the NRL's on off-season, but I saw an uncanny resemblance between Dupont and Halibut to Damien Cook and Cody Walker. They're some of the best. Like Cody Walker will react off Damien Cook and cuts a line, and they seem to know each other really well. Dupont and Halibut were exactly the same, man. Like at one point off a scrum, Dupont runs with pace, drops him under. Halibut just runs across him and feeds him in through a gap. And then another time when they set up a try, Halibut just is running flat and hard, and Dupont gives the ball on the chest. It sucks in 2 defenders, and he puts the big French lock through for an easy try. And then on the other try, he comes out the back of the forward pot. This is Halibut, and injects himself into the line again, sucks in defenders, pops it up to the reserve hooker, and it's all too easy. Like I love watching those two off the back of really good forward play and physicality and all that. But the more that those two can inject themselves in the game for the French, the more tries they'll score, because they actually really like building that scoreboard pressure. They took their threes when on offer, didn't go to the corner too much, took a quick tap, but outside of that, they took their threes. So I think the key for the All Blacks when they do play them is if they can keep themselves discipline free and not give them opportunities to go for those threes, it'll force the French to play a little bit, and those may come off, and when they come off it's amazing, but those 50-50s also give you an opportunity to steal it back or get an intercept or something like that. But Dupont and Halibut, I tell you what, man, watch them. It's so good. You could put the Rabbitohs and them over each other, and it's like Damien Cook, Cody Walker, the way they react off each other. Good footy.
Yeah.
For you, Bryn, you enjoy watching a bit of Dupont. What is it about his halfback play that really makes you excited?
He's so instinctive, and if you look traditionally, take away Dupont, halfbacks don't have 11, 12 carries in a game, but it seems to be the French way and the French DNA of it's a lot's around Dupont, and so. If you look at in the All Blacks, this is going to come in a fortnight's time, but, if you can shut down his space and being able to get him just to pass first, that's really a win if you're defending him, because, look, when he gets an opportunity to be in space, whether it just be around the ruck or just in general play, he's just so quick and so abrasive and so strong into contact that he really is a weapon as well. And I agree with you, Jip. Those two work so well together. And I thought, both of those boys were, for me, best on park. But at the same time, the forward work that they've been able to get them over the advantage line is massive. And so, when you have 600 metres and have 36 defenders beaten, so that's bringing back that French flair that we've talked about, how much we love seeing them play with offloads and being able to get the ball in front of them. Because look, I think, that attacking ability is going to be, causing a lot of trouble for the All Blacks. And I know they've got another, it's with your Ireland first. I need to calm myself down to not think about the French. But I'm just so excited to be able to see when you look at the likes of those guys that we're talking about that are putting teams under pressure a lot just through their attacking ability, which I love to see from the French. It's what I've seen in the past growing up, and even before their time when they were top tier in the world. So now I'm looking forward to it, and looking forward to seeing more of Dupont in the next coming weeks.
Their defensive shape will be different to what they face this week. Like, they're quite a up hard hold and push team, and their wingers will fly up, get in the eyesight, but then they actually backtrack and they use the sideline as their friend. So they sometimes try to mimic rush D, but they're actually not. And that's why they got such good reward at the breakdown. They got so many turnovers through their connected D line would come up together, they'd shuffle, player would take them around the legs, and their hunting player would just go straight in on the ball. And they got great rewards against an Argentinian team that is known for their abrasive cleanouts. So I think that it's almost fool's gold a little bit, because they're bringing you into their trap, and they're making you think you've got time on the ball to make decisions, but it's actually what they're wanting to do. They're manipulating the attack to do what their defensive system needs to do. So there's some fantastic work going in by their forwards. I can't just be all about the back chat. Got to get that forwards chat in there.
Moving on from there, Scotland versus the Wallabies. Now, did one of you guys pick the Scottish upset? I think it might have been Bryn.
Yeah, it did. And I was just a point shy, wasn't I? So I did say 3 points in. But yeah, a very surprising game, to be honest, more so from the Australians. Look, full credit to be able to for the Scottish and being able to get that result. But yeah, I don't know about you, Jip, but I was a little bit surprised on kind of the approach, and more so the kind of inaccuracy and the kind of discipline was probably one that I was thinking was the biggest shock for me.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at how they've made their success over the last few weeks of that rugby championship, is they're a high possession, high territory side. So they played in the right parts of the field, and they recycled their ball a lot and waited for the defence to be in a position to pounce, and they made great option taking. When they played the Scottish, I don't know if you remember it, Iki Tau made a nice little break off that charge down early, and then he flicks it behind his back sort of aimlessly, and that gets a turnover. Tom Wright, James O'Connor makes a great injection in the line, gives it to Tom Wright, and he tries to flick the ball just back on the inside to James O'Connor, whether he was expecting or not. Another knock on. I think Hunter Paisami cleaned well past the ball, so and then that would have been a try in the corner, but it got called back. Then Alan Alatoa tried to fly into a ruck, and that try got pulled back. So a couple of things that they got right weren't there. They didn't have that controlled aggression. Like, they've been winning collisions in a controlled manner, and I don't think they did that well. And the examples there, obviously, Alan Alatoa and Hunter Paisami on the edge tried to fly in with just a shoulder, and he missed completely and fell out the other side. But I just don't think they had that collision area nailed in their heads. They were trying to make a statement. They were trying to hurt them, but it wasn't always within the laws of the game, and it put them under too much pressure. And then those unforced errors, that wasn't in their game in the Rugby Championship. You just didn't see that. They'd take the extra ruck, they'd build it, they'd manipulate the D, and then they'd go. So yeah, there's been a bit of changes. And you might say guys new to the environment, but the guys that were new to the environment didn't play an initial role. Those other guys have been there for a long time. And, the one person they probably did miss is Samu Karevi, and just his decision-making on attack and D. Hunter makes some great decisions. I think once he absolutely snapped someone in half in that second half, but then he makes one that creates opportunities for others as well. And he's just got to get that controlled aggression right, I think, if he wants to fit that 12 jersey and really try and build himself as a Samu Karevi understudy sort of thing, because Samu's game's just so clinical at 12.
One of the interesting talking points during the commentary was the fact that Stuart Hogg had dropped 5 kg, and he looked really, really sharp. Um, Bryn, does 5 kg make that big of a difference to an individual player carrying that little bit of muscle mass to how fast you feel on your feet?
Oh, I definitely think it helps. I think, possibly, you do put on weight to try and, win that contact area and being able to be abrasive in contact. But look, I think, especially if you're an outside back, he's made that decision to be able to lose a bit of weight, to be able to, get that kind of jinkiness and being able to break through the line. And he did that on the weekend, was a good instance of that, him being able to get around and then get through and exert that kind of first initial 10-metre burst that he had on the weekend. So, look, I think it is a big thing. And I guess for him, that's an area that he feels that he wants to evolve and being able to, that's what wants to be his difference, that kind of first burst and being able to get through that point of contact really, really quick. And so whenever you lose that amount of weight, it definitely does help with that kind of movements and being able to be a little bit more quicker in your first movement, and especially in that first 5 to 10 minutes, first to 5 to 10 meters, is really crucial. And then at the back end, when you do get that kind of first kind of 10 meters over the advantage line and through, it's in that top end speed that the outside backs really do need, and having that kind of 5 kgs less is definitely going to be helping that kind of department for sure.
Wales versus the Springboks. That game was an absolute doozy. Right on the edge of the seat all the way to the end, and the emotion at the end from the box was there to see. It was palpable what it meant to them. Jipper, when you watched that game, were you surprised at all by how close Wales were, considering there weren't a huge amount of changes from the All Blacks? A few, but not a huge amount.
No, there wasn't, but understanding the wet conditions were there was a lot more rain throughout the whole game, which changed things a bit and tested the skill level. But we know that the Welsh are a good side. They won the Six Nations, so they've got the ability, and for the most part, they showed it so well. I mean, their defence in their 22 was exceptional. Like, they were under the pump. Springboks are actually using the ball, trying to use their big men to get over, but not managing to do so. So, opting for the 3 points here and there, and it was obviously penalty trading. But the deciding factor, I think, again, and we sort of saw it in the All Blacks test, is that impact off the bench, and Marks and Kitsoff, played a big moment at the end there where Kitsoff gets the turnover. Marks is in there holding him. Marks just, like, I'm going to sound like a cheerleader, but he needs more minutes, mate. Like, he is so good. And the impact he presents, at scrum time, line-out time, core roles are great, but just in and around that breakdown, he's just a nuisance. Might sometimes give away a penalty here or there, but I would say that the cost-benefit analysis is heavily outweighed for him to be in there and get turnovers. So I think the bench was the critical factor, and I suppose the Springboks just went to what they're good at, and that was, kick it to the corner. But also, Sia Khaleesi, you've got to give him credit for his courage to kick to the corner when they were behind in such a big game. And then obviously Marks gets that try. And then he was smart enough, I believe, that with 3 minutes to go, it's easier for us to be down our end and kicked into the corner and make them try and get their way out even if we don't score. And they got the ball back, and then obviously that turnover won it. But there were a couple of key moments in that last 20 that won that game for them. And I think it'll put them in good stead, because they know they didn't play as well as they would want to, but they'll take a hell of a lot of confidence. It's a huge win. And, I know France Stain came on early off the bench, but he must be pushing for a start as well. He's played 2 big performances.
That boot continues to do good things for him, right?
Yeah, it does. It definitely does. And look, I think anytime you can bring a guy that's that experienced and in such big moments as well, I completely agree with Jip. Just be able to get his kicking game. He's a big body as well in that kind of contact area when he can attack, or even defensively as well. So he's definitely pushing for a start. And then I think the biggest thing for me was it's a tough one that was kind of talked around. It was in that 62nd minute when that fan came on. If you're looking around, like, I feel sorry for Johnny McNichol and Liam Williams on the edge there, because look, they work so hard to get those positions. If you're talking around test matches and moments, being able to execute under pressure, and then you've got some fan that just comes on and kind of, you can even see Liam Williams, when Johnny McNichol's getting past, he's seeing what's in front of him, and yes, the ball was a little bit back, but that kind of moment there in a test match, I felt very sorry for Wales and for that fan to get on, because look, I think at that time it was 15 all that time, and in a crucial moment of that game, and the difference between a penalty that they ended up getting but a try in the corner was completely different. So it's the second time it's happened at that stadium. So you'd hope to think the security people will be able to sort that out, because look, you don't want something like that happening. You see fans come on the field, but in a moment like that where it's actually inflicted, where it's kind of stopped the try or stopped a big moment in a game, it was just a shame to see that happen for sure.
And it's actually happened 3 times that Plonker was back on the field for the anthems again, for Japan, standing like he was next to the All Blacks the week before. It's actually a concern, like the safety of the players you've got to take into account, and it's ridiculous.
Is it a stitch up? Is it like an
inside
advertising
job.
campaign or something that everyone knows about, like, and it's going to be released? Like, how is he doing it? Like, I know he's in full kit, but it's like with all the intensity of COVID protocols, he's really putting the game at risk. And I know some people find it funny, but there's a lot that goes into making sure that everyone's safe and well and these games can be played. And it puts that in jeopardy. So that just makes me think there must be, I don't know, are we out of the secret or out of the loop here?
But he's doing it across the board. Cricket, all different sports. It's just insane. It's got to be an inside job. He knows somebody.
It's got to be good for doing one. It must be doing wonders for his Instagram or social media, man. Because look, it's what we're talking about, aren't we? And we're in New Zealand, so fair play to him. But I think it's putting people at risk. And you talk around COVID, and then the Test match on the weekend with Wales and South Africa, a massive moment in that game for some idiot to come onto the field and take away that moment, So whether it's an inside job that we're not knowing about, but it's making media around the world. And it's even being talked about in New Zealand. So he's doing his job well, isn't he?
Yeah. I'd like to talk about the England-Tonga game. It was a big score, 69-3, but maybe we shouldn't talk about it in the context of the game. Maybe we should talk about it in the context of these new world eligibility laws, because Tonga is one of the teams that would benefit hugely from the eligibility laws that are being put to the table. Essentially, from my understanding, it's a look to maybe allow a player a 3-year stand down if they can play for the country of their birth, their parents' birth, or their grandparents' birth. So people like Charles Piutau, Nani Laumape, people like that could end up, Malakai Fekitoa has obviously done it via sevens, but people like that can end up in that Tongan side, and then they will not be on the end of 69-3 hidings, because these guys are top-level, highly experienced players. And I wonder whether or not this will get over the line. Jipper, do you think this is the right thing for World Rugby to do?
Look, I think I've said it on here before. I think the more we can make our sport a global game and tighter contests, the better. And if that gives players the ability to live out their dream of representing the All Blacks, Australia, England, and then later in their career have the ability to go back and give back to their country of origin, then I just think, why not? Like, we shouldn't be afraid of it. And I think it's got to the point where World Rugby aren't, and they're going to make a necessary decision to open it up. I don't think it'll solve all the problems, but it'll certainly bring some experience and some X factor into these sides that will hopefully help grow the players underneath that are coming through, and potentially, that they want to represent Tonga rather than going for an other nation moving forward. I don't know. But I don't think we can say it's going to solve everything, but I think it's something that is moving in the right direction.
When you look, Bryn, at, looking maybe Bundy Key playing for a country like Ireland, do you think that the Northern Hemisphere teams and countries are going to be motivated to allow a law like this when they're quite obviously the benefactor of the current situation?
Well, look, I think that's it. It's probably the Northern Hemisphere decision making around, probably stunting the opportunity for these kind of players that have played for different, for the All Blacks, Australia, or any other Tier 1 nation, to then be able to give back to their the island nations. Because look, I look at Charles Piutau for a perfect example. A guy that played for the All Blacks, left it probably at the peak of his power in his career. And is one of the highest paid players in the world, and we don't get to see him on an international level. We're fortunate enough if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, you get to see him play for Bristol, and being able to play in that kind of that competition. But for me, I'd love to see guys of that caliber who haven't played for the All Blacks. Charles has been gone for a long way now, so he'd be in that kind of realm of not playing 3-4 years for the All Blacks, and being able to get him into that kind of Tongan team, or anybody as an example. It's only going to add product for the world rugby, for our brand, having those kind of players playing for those nations. And you look at kind of 2003 is probably the last time you look at the Tongan team that went really deep into that World Cup, and even Fiji as well as another examples, or even back in the early days, the Samoan and the Tongan team being able to go deep into competition. It's just great for the world rugby brand to have those kind of nations in that kind of quarterfinal stage, because look, it's tough for the Tongan teams on the weekend. You look at Tonga when they played the All Blacks against England, and yes, they're playing for their country and they love putting on that jersey, but I think for us as fans, we want them to be able to do really, really well, because not only do they give so much to the Tongan rugby, but so much in world rugby, with how many players and how many internationals that are Pacific Islander descent playing in the world rugby. So it'd be great for them, the powers that be, that hopefully they do give them the opportunity to play for their country of birth, and are given a second opportunity in playing in international rugby, which I think it's only going to add to the brand of world rugby and making our game a lot better.
Why don't we have a look at the predictions for the men's game before we carry on into the women's games this weekend? Let's do a bit of a quick fire then, eh? All Blacks Ireland. First with you, Bryn.
All Blacks.
All Blacks.
Scotland Springboks.
Springboks. Close. It's close.
Ooh.
Go Scotland, mate.
Upset there, wouldn't it?
No, I've done my one and done, mate.
Get your Scots. Get your Scots, mate.
Tell me you had a multi on last week, Brynner.
I didn't, mate. I didn't.
Not allowed to.
But it was more so for my pride, our WhatsApp group saying that I got it right. So now it was more so the pride of that in our WhatsApp group, lads.
Argentina v Italy.
Argentina.
England versus the Wallabies.
Wallabies.
England.
Okay, why?
I just want to back the Wallabies. I don't think it was as drastic as everyone made out. We'll go back to they're in control of their own destiny. They've got some good systems in place, good building blocks, and if you have to play a loose head at tight head, I can assure you that is very hard. And James Slipper had to move across, and I thought that was the making and breaking of that game towards the end. And I know Alan Aotearoa came back on, but the fact that Slipper held his own for Leota's try was impressive. But I mean, the way Mike Cron explained it to us, it's like wiping your backside with the other hand. It is not an easy thing to do, and not something I'm sure he's trained for. So I'm just going to stick with them. I reckon good growth path.
I take it that night you went in practice with the other hand, did you?
Don't know, mate. I'm not a prop. You see, I'm a hooker, just in the middle. But I'm sure a few props did.
France v Georgia, Brennan.
Yeah, France convincingly. Yeah,
the French.
And Wales v Fiji. Wales, straightforward.
Yeah, Wales, I reckon.
I'll pick Wales, but yeah, I think it'll be a little bit closer than what people think it'll be.
Okay. Well, let's move on to the women's game then. There's a number of interesting internationals over the weekend, probably the biggest of which was England once again extending the record for the biggest win over the Black Ferns, 56-15. Another difficult watch for New Zealand rugby fans who expect World Cup wins, not huge 50-point defeats from the Black Ferns. Jipper, what did you make of that performance and where were it all wrong?
Oh, look, it's really hard to play footy on the back foot. And there was some serious dominance up front from the English pack, and they scored a number of maul tries, pushed them a great distance to then set up a yellow card, unfortunately, down the sideline. So I think that physicality and winning the battle up front and then their ill discipline really put them under pressure in that first half. I think it was 60% possession to 40 and 70% territory to 30. And it's just too hard a job when you're not winning any collisions. It doesn't give your D-line time to set, time to get up and put pressure. So I think the best thing this week is potentially just keep things really simple, and that's sometimes the best way to go when you've had a couple of losses. Speaking from experience, is just run hard, clean hard, tackle hard, do basic set piece stuff, and just declutter the mind, because there'll be a lot of they're really proud of the Black Ferns jersey, and they'll be feeling it. So I think sometimes reducing the clutter in your head, getting a real simple gain line. And the thing is, if you win a collision, you're halfway there. You don't need all the fancy moves or anything. You just need to move bodies, or you need to carry low, get through that contact, or defensively, you've got to be set and you've got to go get people. And I think if it's that simple mindset, they give themselves the ability to bounce back against the French. But I think it does show, and I'm not making excuses for them, but any team that doesn't play for 2 years, we talked about Ben Darwin earlier around inexperienced combinations. And there was a lot of change from Test 1 to Test 2, a lot of debutants through this tour. So, there is some stuff playing against them, and they're coming off the back of not having, I think their camp got disrupted. They didn't have as long a camp because of COVID. They had a couple of warm-up 30-minute fixtures and then straight into England, who are world number one. It's not easy. And I know they would have backed themselves, and I'm not saying they shouldn't, but there's some fundamental basics that they're just not winning at the moment.
And Bryn, those basics went backwards in a week. We were expecting the opposite. We talk about time together. It didn't do them any good.
Oh yeah, but I think it just comes back to you look at England and how well they're playing. There's only so much you can do as a player and as a team if you don't get those things right that Jip alluded to. Like, you're looking around your set piece. How many times have we talked around set piece wins test matches, and when you get line out maul drives scored against you, or even opportunities as well. I think there's one where they had a line out maul drive, halfback takes it down the blind side and then being able to draw and pass, but it was a bad pass and they don't score from that. But those are the kind of opportunities that present itself through the dominance of that line out maul. And so, look, I know the Black Ferns coaches and players will take a real hard look around this, but I think when you do lose a couple of test matches in such convincing fashion, those kind of things, being able to strip it right back and make things really, really easy, like Jip said, making a real easy game plan, winning your contacts, and whether that just be a lean menu. And what I mean by that is just a lean playbook of plays that you do have in your arsenal, and then making it real clear as a player, okay, we've got a real short menu, we can just go and execute that, and it becomes really easy thinking, and you're not cluttering around some of the points that Jip said. But I think it does come back. The World Cup is next year, and what it will do for this team would be able to give them a real kick up the backside, and knowing that, yep, we do love putting on the jersey, but knowing that that England are the number one team in the world, and there's a few things that need to be changed. And they do have a test match against France and against a quality outfit, and so being able to get a few things right that they have coming through their English series. And we look at the Australians, and I know the scoreboard was a little bit different, but the Australians and the learnings that they made from the All Blacks and the 2 losses or 3 losses that they had, and then we'll be able to quickly turn it around to play against another opponent and being able to rectify a lot of those things that the All Blacks. So no different from the Black Ferns and taking those learnings from the English game. So it'll be tough for them. They're a proud bunch, and but no doubt they'll be having those hard conversations and wanting to end the tour in the right way, because they haven't been overseas. They can use all the excuses, we can say the preparation time, but they're a proud team, and they'll be able to want to put a good performance to get a win against a French team who go pretty well in the Six Nations as well.
And gave it to South Africa this weekend. I caught a little bit of that game, and the French women, like the French men, when they spot a gap, they know how to play ball, Jipper.
Yeah, and I think the key will be, I think we've got the firepower. When we got our structures right and we got the ball free and we did win collision, we scored points. And not easy points, but we got to the edge and did the business. So I just think the biggest focus, seriously, as simple as it sounds, is that if you win more collisions than your opposite, you'll win the game. But if you lose more, you're going to be on the back. It's just so hard to play footy that way. And I know the French will be coming in confident, and they'll probably be looking at that maul, and hopefully the Black Ferns can make the adjustments in that maul and try to work together or have a plan together, rather than, I suppose, just smacking it in ones and twos.
Any players that you saw? I thought Maliepo made a difference when she came in off the bench. Any changes there possible, Bryn, Jip, either of you?
I'll go. I think some experience got dropped. And I think, well, not dropped, but the opportunity was given elsewhere. I don't know the ins and outs of how it happened, but I think that experience from Test 1 needs to come back. They'll be firing. And as that leadership group almost needs to take the week as their own and like really drive home by actions and standards throughout the week, and then in the game those more experienced players really step up and show the way for a lot of these young players.
I think possibly as well, having Chelsea Ellie possibly coming back with Grace Brooker on the weekend. She looked pretty serious, that injury. So, we know pretty well. But I think, the fact that didn't get the opportunity to play on the weekend will be burning inside her. So no doubt, I think, possibly her or even Hohepa coming into that fold as well. If we talk around experience and someone that's played, and on the wing and possibly in the midfield, whether that be at 13, not 12. That's probably one position I see there might be a bit of change just due to the fact of Grace Brooker being injured on the weekend.
And a combination with Flula and Woodman outside, those three seem like a really potent midfield through outside back heading to the right.
They are, but again, I hate to sound so simple, but it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. Like if they don't win their set piece, and they don't win the scrum, and they don't win the breakdown area, it doesn't matter who's out there. I'm sorry, but it's like it's just those collisions need to be won, and they're great players. They're all great players, but England on the day won the physical battle.
Well, there's a lot of footy to watch over the weekend, Jipper, so you'll be pretty happy, say, with you, Bryn. I think we've got 6 odd internationals, plus we've got the Bunnings NPC, and then there's, that's only the male internationals, sorry. We've got the All Blacks versus, the Blackbirds versus France as well. So there's a fair bit to watch this weekend, plenty to catch on Sky Sport, and plenty to talk about with RugbyPass.com. Thank you once again for joining the Aotearoa Rugby Pod. James Parsons, Bryn Hall, Ross Karl, we'll see you again next week.